Jasmine Crockett wasn't your average politician. She was the kind of person who didn't just sit back and watch things happen. She made them happen. Born and raised in Texas, she grew up seeing firsthand how life could be tough for people, stuck in unfair situations. Her family wasn't rich, but they were fighters, and that spirit stayed with her as she grew older. After finishing law school, Jasmine became a public defender, a job where you stand up for people who can't afford fancy lawyers. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave her a front-row seat to the struggles everyday folks faced. Whether it was someone wrongly accused or a single mom trying to keep her kids safe, Jasmine saw it all. And every case left its mark on her, but defending people in court wasn't enough for her. Jasmine wanted to change the system itself, so she entered politics. At first, no one really paid attention to her. People thought, "Who is this fiery woman from Texas?" But soon, they couldn't ignore her. Jasmine had a way of speaking that grabbed people's attention. She didn't mince words. She said exactly what was on her mind. When something seemed wrong, she called it out, even if it meant stepping on powerful toes. Her big break came when she started using social media to share her thoughts. Back then, most politicians treated platforms like Twitter as boring places to post press releases. Not Jasmine. She turned her account into a megaphone for truth-telling. Every tweet was sharp, funny, and packed with passion. Within months, thousands of followers tuned in to hear what she had to say. Young voters especially loved her because she talked about issues that mattered to them, things like student loans, healthcare, and racial justice. As her popularity grew, so did her confidence. Jasmine wasn't afraid to take risks anymore. If there was a controversial topic, she'd dive right into it. If someone tried to silence her, she'd speak louder. Her boldness earned her enemies, sure, but it also won her loyal supporters. People began calling her the voice of the unheard. One day, while scrolling through her feed, Jasmine stumbled upon an interview featuring Vance. If you've heard his name before, you probably know he's not exactly everyone's cup of tea. A former venture capitalist turned senator from Ohio, JD often made headlines for saying things that rubbed people the wrong way. His comments about poor communities, in particular, sparked heated debates across the country. Some praised him for being brutally honest, while others accused him of blaming victims instead of addressing root causes. Listening to him talk, Jasmine felt a mix all at once: anger, frustration, and maybe even a little curiosity. Here was a man whose worldview clashed directly with hers. While she believed in lifting people up through support and resources, he leaned toward personal responsibility and self-reliance. They were polar opposites in almost every way. But instead of dismissing him outright, Jasmine decided to pay closer attention. After all, understanding your opponent is key to winning any battle. What started as casual observation quickly turned into something bigger. Jasmine realized Vance represented more than just one individual. It was everything she stood against. His rise in politics symbolized a growing divide between those who cared about systemic change and those who preferred to focus on individual effort. To her, this wasn't just a disagreement over policy. It was a clash of values. And so, Jasmine made up her mind. She wouldn't let Vance slide by unnoticed. If he wanted to throw punches, she'd throw them right back, and harder. Little did she know this decision would set off a chain reaction neither of them could have predicted. At this point, Jasmine wasn't thinking about fame or drama. All she cared about was standing up for what she believed in. But sometimes, standing up means stepping into the spotlight, and once you're there, it's hard to step away. For better or worse, Jasmine was about to find herself in the middle of a storm. And storms, as we all know, bring both destruction and clarity. It was a Tuesday morning like any other in Washington, D.C. The air inside the congressional hearing room was thick with tension. Lawmakers shuffled papers, whispered to their aides, and occasionally glanced at the clock, eager for the session to begin, or maybe just end. For most people in that room, it was business as usual. But for Jasmine Crockett and Vance, this day would become anything but ordinary. The topic on the agenda? economic inequality and its impact on working-class Americans. It was a subject both had strong opinions about, though their views couldn't have been more different. Jasmine saw economic inequality as a symptom of deeper problems: racism, sexism, lack of access to education, and decades of policies favoring the wealthy. To her, fixing it meant addressing those root causes head-on. J.D. Vance, on the other hand, approached the issue from a completely different angle. He believed poverty wasn't just about money, it was about mindset. In his view, too many people relied on government programs instead of taking responsibility for their own lives. Sure, there were exceptions, but he argued that hard work and determination could overcome almost any obstacle. When J.D. took the microphone to deliver his opening statement, the room fell silent. His voice carried authority, and his words painted a picture of resilience and grit. He spoke about growing up poor in Ohio, about how his family had struggled but still managed to push forward. "We didn't wait around for someone else to solve our problems," he said, leaning slightly into the podium. "We figured out ways to make things better ourselves." The audience nodded along, some scribbling notes, others crossing their arms thoughtfully. But Jasmine wasn't nodding. She sat quietly, her pen tapping against her notepad in quiet frustration. Every word J.D. spoke felt like a slap to the face, not because it was personal, but because she knew how misleading it sounded. To her, his story ignored the millions of families who worked multiple jobs, sacrificed everything, and still couldn't catch a break. Hard work alone wasn't enough when the system itself was broken. Finally, it was Jasmine's turn to speak. She stood up slowly, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly at J.D. before turning to address the room. Her tone was calm at first, almost conversational. "I appreciate Senator Vance sharing his story," she began, pausing briefly to let the words sink in. "But I want to remind everyone here today that anecdotes aren't data. Just because one person succeeded doesn't mean the system works for everyone." Her gaze shifted to the audience now, scanning faces as if searching for agreement. "Let's talk about the single mother working 2 minimum-wage jobs while raising 3 kids. Let's talk about the college graduate drowning in student loan debt despite doing everything right. Let's talk about the Black and brown communities systematically excluded from opportunities for generations. Are we really going to tell them their struggles are their own fault?" The room buzzed with murmurs. Some attendees nodded vigorously, while others frowned, clearly uncomfortable. Jasmine's words weren't just aimed at J.D., they were a challenge to anyone who thought economic inequality was a simple problem with a simple solution. J.D. listened intently, his expression unreadable. When it was his turn to respond, he didn't raise his voice or get defensive. Instead, he leaned back slightly, adopting a measured tone that contrasted sharply with Jasmine's fiery delivery. "Congresswoman Crockett makes valid points," he admitted, surprising a few people in the room. "But let's not pretend that throwing more money at the problem will fix it. Empathy is important, yes, but so is accountability. If we keep giving people fish without teaching them how to fish, we're setting them up for failure." The exchange went back and forth like this for nearly an hour. Each time Jasmine countered one of J.D.'s arguments, he found a way to reframe it. And whenever J.D. tried to simplify the issue, Jasmine pushed back with real-world examples. By the end of the hearing, neither side had convinced the other. But something unexpected had happened. They'd captured everyone's attention. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, eager to capture the drama unfolding before them. Cameras flashed as photographers snapped pictures of the two lawmakers locked in debate. Even the usually stoic members of Congress seemed unusually engaged, whispering amongst themselves about what they'd just witnessed. Outside the hearing room, the buzz only grew louder. Clips of the exchange quickly made their way online, where viewers devoured every second. Social media erupted with reactions. Some cheered Jasmine for standing up to J.D., praising her passion and unflinching honesty. Others sided with J.D., applauding his focus on personal responsibility and practical solutions. What started as a routine discussion about economic policy had morphed into something far bigger. A clash of ideologies played out on a national stage. Neither Jasmine nor J.D. realized it at the time, but this moment marked the beginning of a rivalry that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. As the hearing wrapped up, Jasmine packed her notes into her bag, her mind already racing ahead to the next move. Across the room, JD did the same, his jaw set firmly as if bracing for whatever came next. Neither walked away satisfied, but both knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot, and somewhere deep down, maybe they both understood that their disagreement reflected a much larger divide in America, one that wouldn't be resolved anytime soon. But for now, all eyes were on them, watching to see who would blink first. The hearing might have ended, but the real battle was just beginning. By the time Jasmine Crockett stepped out of the congressional chamber, her phone was already buzzing nonstop. Notifications flooded in from Twitter, texts piled up from friends, and supporters and emails poured into her inbox faster than she could read them. It didn't take long for her to realize that her clash with J.D. Vance wasn't staying confined to the walls of Congress. It had spilled over into the digital world where millions were watching. Jasmine wasted no time jumping into the fray. Sitting in her office later that day, she fired off a series of tweets dissecting J.D.'s arguments point by point. Her tone was sharp, witty, and unapologetic, the kind of voice that resonated with her followers. Personal responsibility is great, she wrote in one tweet, but what happens when the system itself blocks people from succeeding? Asking folks to work harder won't fix broken schools or unfair wages. The post went viral almost instantly, racking up thousands of likes and retweets within minutes. Her next move? Humor. Knowing how much memes and sarcasm appealed to younger audiences, Jasmine leaned into it. She posted a gif of a character from The Great Gatsby, the wealthy, out-of-touch Jay Gatsby, and captioned it, "When J.D. Vance talks about hard work like he knows what struggling feels like." Followers ate it up, turning the clip into a trending moment online. Hashtags like Vance vs Reality started popping up everywhere, with people sharing their own takes on the debate. But if Jasmine thought J.D. Vance would stay silent, she was mistaken. He may not have been as quick on the draw as she was, but he wasn't about to let her dominate the narrative. A few hours later, J.D. logged onto Twitter himself and fired back with a tweet of his own. "Congresswoman Crockett seems more interested in sound bites than substance," he wrote. "Maybe instead of lecturing me, she should focus on fixing her district." The jab hit its mark. Supporters of J.D. cheered, calling him a master of comebacks. Critics, however, accused him of deflecting from the actual issues at hand. Either way, the comment ignited another wave of reactions. Some defended Jasmine, pointing out that her fiery style was exactly what politics needed. Others agreed with J.D., saying her approach came across as performative rather than productive. What followed was a full-blown social media war. Over the next few days, both sides traded barbs, memes, and accusations. Every time Jasmine posted something, J.D. countered with a response, and vice versa. Their feeds became battlegrounds, each trying to outwit the other while rallying their respective bases. Late-night comedians couldn't resist jumping in either. Clips of their debate were replayed on shows like The Daily Show and Last Week. Tonight, with hosts cracking jokes about everything from J.D.'s bootstraps philosophy to Jasmine's mic drop moments. For Jasmine, this online back and forth felt natural. Social media was her playground, after all. She thrived in spaces where she could connect directly with people, bypassing traditional gatekeepers like news outlets or lobbyists. But J.D. was no stranger to the game either. Having built a career in tech before entering politics, he understood the power of platforms like Twitter. While his tone lacked Jasmine's flair for humor, his calm, calculated responses struck a chord with those who preferred logic over emotion. Despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it, their feud caught fire. People who'd never paid attention to politics before suddenly found themselves invested. Families argued over dinner tables about who was right. Friends debated in group chats late into the night. Even strangers joined forces online, forming alliances based solely on whose side they supported. For a brief moment, America seemed divided not along party lines, but between Team Jasmine and Team J.D. And then came the money. As the drama unfolded, Donations began pouring into both politicians' campaign funds at record rates. Supporters eager to back their chosen fighter opened their wallets wide. For Jasmine, the influx of cash meant resources to expand her grassroots efforts. She used the funds to host virtual town halls, create ads targeting young voters, and even launch a podcast where she discussed systemic inequality with activists and experts. JD, meanwhile, funneled his windfall into bolstering his image as a pragmatic leader. He hired writers to craft polished op-eds and produced videos showcasing his commitment to helping working-class communities. But not everyone was thrilled about the escalating spectacle. Some critics questioned whether this public spat was distracting from real issues. Progressive allies of Jasmine worried that focusing so much energy on JD undermined her broader mission. Conservatives close to JD expressed concern that his combative tone alienated moderate voters, a demographic crucial for winning elections. Both sides faced pressure to dial things back, yet neither showed signs of backing down. Behind closed doors, though, the toll of the constant scrutiny began to show. Jasmine spent hours crafting her tweets, wanting every word to land perfectly. Late nights turned into early mornings as she strategized her next moves. Her team urged her to pace herself, reminding her that burnout wouldn't help anyone. Still, she pressed on, driven by a sense of duty to keep fighting. JD, too, wrestled with doubts. Despite his composed exterior, he privately wondered if engaging with Jasmine was worth the risk. Was he feeding into the very polarization he claimed to oppose? His advisors reassured him that standing firm on his principles mattered more than avoiding controversy. But deep down he knew this confrontation wasn't just about policy. It was personal now. As days turned into weeks, the internet remained ablaze with chatter. Memes multiplied, hashtags trended, and opinion pieces analyzing every twist and turn dominated headlines. What started as a heated exchange during a congressional hearing had morphed into a cultural phenomenon. Neither Jasmine nor JD could have predicted how far-reaching their clash would become, or how deeply it would resonate with people across the country. Yet amid the noise, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about two politicians duking it out online. It was about bigger questions of fairness, opportunity, and what it truly means to succeed in America. Whether you rooted for Jasmine or sided with JD, the debate forced you to confront uncomfortable truths about the nation's divides. And as the world watched, both figures stood firmly planted in their corners, ready to keep going until the very end. The buzz around Jasmine Crockett and JD Vance had reached a fever pitch. People couldn't stop talking about their fiery exchanges on social media, in interviews, and during congressional hearings. It seemed like everywhere you turned, someone was weighing in on who was right, who was wrong, and what it all meant for America. The public's appetite for more was insatiable, and the news networks knew they had to capitalize on it. That's when a major cable network stepped in with an idea. Why not bring them together for a live town hall event? They pitched it as a chance to go beyond sound bites and dig into the meat of the issues. No interruptions, no shouting matches, just raw, unfiltered conversation between two opposing voices. The title of the event said it all: America Divided. It promised to be a night where both sides would have to defend their beliefs under the hot lights of scrutiny, and in front of millions of viewers. When the invitations went out, there was never any doubt that Jasmine and JD would accept. Turning down such a high-profile platform would look weak, and neither was willing to give the other that kind of advantage. Plus, deep down, they both relished the opportunity to prove their point once and for all. So, with contracts signed and dates set, preparations began. The night of the town hall arrived, and the energy in the auditorium was electric. Supporters packed the seats, waving signs and chanting slogans. Some held up banners supporting Jasmine. Others cheered loudly for JD. The atmosphere felt less like a political forum and more like a sporting event, complete with rival factions rooting for their team. Camera crews darted around, capturing every angle, while moderators prepped backstage, determined to keep things civil. When Jasmine walked onto the stage, she commanded attention. Dressed in bold red, a color that screamed confidence and conviction, she exuded strength. Her presence alone seemed to energize the crowd. A few rows away, JD took his seat, dressed in navy blue. His demeanor was calm, almost professorial, but there was a glint of determination in his eyes. He wasn't here to back down either. As the cameras rolled and the moderator opened with introductions, the tension in the room was palpable. Both Jasmine and JD nodded politely, shaking hands briefly before taking their places at separate podiums. For a fleeting moment, it almost felt like this could be a respectful discussion. But everyone watching knew better. This was personal now. The first question came from the moderator. Both of you have very different views on economic inequality. Can each of you explain your perspective without interrupting the other? Jasmine leaned forward slightly, gripping the sides of her podium. When she spoke, her voice carried passion and urgency. Economic inequality isn't just about numbers, it's about people, she began. It's about families who work multiple jobs and still can't afford health care. It's about kids attending schools that don't have enough books or teachers. These aren't problems caused by laziness, they're caused by decades of bad policies that favor the wealthy. We need systemic change, not lectures about working harder. The audience erupted in applause, many standing to cheer. JD waited patiently, letting the noise die down before responding. When he finally spoke, his tone was measured but firm. I agree that we need solutions, he said, but I disagree on how to get there. Telling people the system is rigged doesn't empower them. It excuses failure. Real change comes when individuals take responsibility for their lives. Government programs may help temporarily, but they don't create long-term success. His words drew mixed reactions. Some clapped enthusiastically, nodding along, while others booed, clearly unhappy with his message. The moderator quickly moved on to the next question, which came from an audience member. What do you say to communities that feel left behind despite working hard? This time, Jasmine didn't hesitate. She looked directly at JD as she answered. Let me tell you something. I've seen these communities firsthand. I've represented clients who worked 60-hour weeks and still couldn't make ends meet. You talk about hard work, but have you ever lived paycheck to paycheck? Have you ever had to choose between paying rent and feeding your children? If you haven't, then maybe you should listen instead of lecturing. Her jab hit home, earning loud cheers from the crowd. JD's jaw tightened ever so slightly, but he kept his composure. When it was his turn to respond, he chose his words carefully. I understand frustration, he said. I grew up poor. My family struggled. But we didn't wait for someone else to fix our problems. We figured out ways to move forward. That's what I'm talking about. Finding solutions, not waiting for handouts. The exchange continued like this throughout the evening, with each speaker pushing back against the other's arguments. At times, the debate grew heated, with audience members shouting their approval or disapproval. Moderators occasionally had to step in to remind everyone of the rules, but even they struggled to maintain control. Amidst the fireworks, however, there were moments of surprising candor. During one particularly intense segment, Jasmine admitted that she sometimes questioned whether her approach alienated potential allies. I know not everyone agrees with me, she said softly, and maybe my style isn't perfect. But if being loud and direct gets people talking about these issues, then I'll take that over silence any day. JD echoed a similar sentiment. Later in the program, asked about criticism that he dismissed systemic racism, he acknowledged the complexity of the issue. Racism exists, he admitted. No one is denying that. What I'm saying is that focusing only on race doesn't solve the bigger problem. We need to address poverty across the board, regardless of skin color. These rare glimpses of vulnerability humanized both figures, reminding viewers that behind the rhetoric were real people grappling with difficult questions. For a brief moment, the divide between them seemed less insurmountable. By the end of the night, neither side emerged as the clear victor. Polls conducted afterward showed mixed results, with some praising Jasmine's passion and others applauding JD's pragmatism. Social media exploded yet again, dissecting every moment of the event. Clips of their sharpest exchanges trended online, sparking endless debates among users. For Jasmine and JD, though, the battle wasn't over. Walking off the stage, they exchanged polite nods, but the underlying tension remained. Each knew this was just another chapter in a much larger story, one that would continue to unfold in the weeks and months ahead. As the audience filed out of the auditorium, conversations buzzed about what they'd witnessed. Whether they agreed with Jasmine or sided with JD, one thing was undeniable. The town hall had forced them to think critically about the challenges facing the nation, and perhaps, in its own messy way, it brought them closer to understanding perspectives different from their own. The town hall ended, but the ripple effects of that night stretched far beyond the auditorium. For Jasmine Crockett and JD Vance, what started as a heated debate had spiraled into something much bigger, something neither of them fully anticipated. While their clash captivated millions, it also exposed cracks within their own circles. Supporters cheered loudly on the surface, but behind closed doors, questions began to arise. Was this constant fighting helping or hurting their causes? Were they truly advancing solutions or just fueling division? For Jasmine, the morning after the town hall was a whirlwind. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages from supporters praising her performance. Donations poured in, and her social media following skyrocketed overnight. To many, she was a hero, a fearless voice standing up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. But not everyone was thrilled. Some progressive allies quietly pulled her aside, expressing concerns about her tactics. "You're doing great work," one ally told her during a private call. "But are you alienating moderates? Not everyone responds well to confrontation." Jasmine listened, nodding thoughtfully, but inside she wrestled with doubt. She knew her style wasn't for everyone. Some saw her boldness as inspiring, others dismissed it as too aggressive. The criticism stung, especially coming from people she respected. Still, she reminded herself why she was doing this. If being loud and unapologetic got people talking about issues like systemic inequality, then wasn't it worth it? Yet, late at night, when the adrenaline faded and the noise quieted, she found herself questioning whether she was making the impact she hoped for. On the other side of the aisle, JD Vance faced his own share of challenges. His calm, methodical approach earned him praise from conservatives who valued pragmatism over theatrics. But moderate Republicans weren't so sure. Many worried that his combative tone and his willingness to engage in public spats was turning off swing voters. One senior party member even pulled him aside after a meeting, saying bluntly, "JD, we need to win elections, not arguments. Are you helping us or hurting us?" Those words lingered in JD's mind long after the conversation ended. He prided himself on staying true to his beliefs, but he couldn't ignore the growing divide within his own ranks. Some colleagues openly distanced themselves from him, fearing association with controversy. Others urged him to soften his message, arguing that compromise, not conflict, was key to winning broader support. It was a tough pill to swallow. For someone who built his career on speaking plainly, the idea of toning down his rhetoric felt unnatural. Despite these internal struggles, neither Jasmine nor JD backed down publicly. In fact, if anything, their determination only intensified. They continued debating on cable news, trading barbs in interviews, and releasing essays detailing their perspectives. Each tried to outmaneuver the other, determined to prove their point once and for all. But beneath the surface, both were grappling with deeper questions about their roles in this larger political landscape. One day, Jasmine sat alone in her office, staring at the wall. Her team had left for the evening, leaving her surrounded by stacks of papers and glowing screens. She replayed moments from the town hall in her head, the applause, the boos, the sharp exchanges. Had she gone too far? Was she contributing to polarization instead of bridging divides? These thoughts gnawed at her, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself and her mission. Meanwhile, JD wrestled with guilt of his own. Sitting in his study late at night, he scrolled through comments on his latest op-ed. Some praised his focus on personal responsibility, while others accused him of ignoring structural barriers. A particular comment caught his eye. "Your ideas sound good in theory, but they don't match reality." The words haunted him. Was he being fair? Could he balance principle with practicality without losing sight of either? As weeks turned into months, The feud between Jasmine and JD evolved in unexpected ways. What began as a war of words transformed into something more nuanced, a reflection of broader societal tensions. Both politicians realized they represented not just themselves but entire ideologies. Their battle wasn't just about economic policy or personal responsibility, it was about competing visions for America's future. In an effort to regain control of the narrative, Jasmine shifted gears slightly. She doubled down on grassroots organizing, focusing less on attacking JD and more on uplifting marginalized voices. She traveled across the country, holding community forums and listening sessions. Her goal was simple: amplify stories often ignored by mainstream discourse. Whether it was a single mother struggling to afford childcare or a factory worker displaced by automation, Jasmine made sure their voices were heard. This pivot resonated deeply with her base, reminding them that her fight wasn't just about winning debates, it was about creating real change. JD, too, made adjustments. Recognizing the need to broaden his appeal, he softened his tone in public appearances. Instead of framing issues solely through the lens of individual effort, he began emphasizing unity and collaboration. During a speech at a local town hall, he surprised many by acknowledging the importance of government programs in certain cases. "We can't solve every problem ourselves," he admitted. "Sometimes systems fail and we have to step in to help." The remark drew cautious applause, signaling a shift in how some viewed his stance. These changes didn't go unnoticed. Critics argued that both were simply playing politics, adjusting their messages to fit shifting winds. Supporters, however, saw it differently. To them, Jasmine and JD were evolving, not abandoning their principles, but adapting to better serve their constituents. After all, leadership isn't static. It requires growth, reflection, and sometimes compromise. By the end of this phase, the dynamic between Jasmine and JD had shifted subtly. They still disagreed fundamentally, but there was a newfound respect brewing beneath the surface. Neither would admit it outright, but privately they acknowledged the complexity of the issues they debated. They understood now that no single solution could address problems as deep-rooted as poverty or inequality. Real progress required nuance, patience, and cooperation, qualities neither had fully embraced at the start of their rivalry. As the dust settled, both emerged changed, not just as politicians but as people. The experience forced them to confront their blind spots, challenge their assumptions, and listen more closely to opposing viewpoints. Though they remained fierce adversaries, they inadvertently paved the way for richer, more meaningful conversations about the nation's most pressing challenges, and perhaps in its messy, imperfect way that was progress. Months had passed since the height of Jasmine Crockett and JD Vance's public feud. The headlines that once dominated news cycles began to fade, replaced by newer controversies and breaking stories. But the impact of their clash lingered far beyond the spotlight. For both politicians and for millions of Americans who followed their every move, the experience left an indelible mark. Jasmine Crockett sat in her office one quiet afternoon, scrolling through old tweets from the height of the drama. She chuckled at some of the memes she'd shared, cringing slightly at others. It was hard to believe how much things had changed since then. What started as a heated confrontation had become a turning point, not just for her career, but for her understanding of leadership. She reflected on the feedback she'd received over the months. Some supporters praised her boldness, saying it inspired them to speak up about injustices they'd long ignored. Others gently urged her to find common ground, reminding her that change often required compromise. These conversations stuck with her. They reminded her that while passion was important, so was patience. You couldn't always win hearts and minds by shouting louder than your opponent. Sometimes you had to listen first. With this realization, Jasmine shifted her focus. Instead of solely targeting high-profile figures like JD, she poured her energy into grassroots organizing. She traveled to communities across the country, meeting people face-to-face and hearing their stories. Whether it was a teacher struggling to make ends meet or a young activist fighting for climate justice, Jasmine made sure their voices were amplified. Her fiery speeches remained, but now they carried a new layer of empathy, a recognition that real progress came from collaboration, not combat. Back in Ohio, J.D. Vance found himself reflecting too. The backlash he'd faced from moderates within his party forced him to reconsider his approach. He still believed deeply in personal responsibility and economic empowerment, but he also recognized the limits of those ideas when applied to complex realities. His conversations with constituents revealed cracks in his worldview, cracks he hadn't noticed before. One particularly eye-opening moment came during a town hall meeting in a rural community. A man stood up and shared his story. Despite working 2 jobs, he couldn't afford health care for his family. "I'm doing everything you say," the man told J.D., "but it's still not enough." Those words hit J.D. hard. For the first time, he realized that systemic barriers could outweigh individual effort, no matter how determined someone was. It wasn't an easy admission, but it was necessary. In response, J.D. began tweaking his messaging. While he continued advocating for self-reliance, he also acknowledged the role government could play in leveling the playing field. During a speech at a veterans center, he surprised many by calling for expanded access to mental health services. "We ask a lot of our heroes," he said. "It's only right that we give them the tools they need to succeed." The crowd erupted in applause, signaling a shift in how some viewed his stance. Though Jasmine and J.D. still disagreed on fundamental issues, their evolution didn't go unnoticed. Observers noted a subtle softening in their rhetoric, a willingness to engage with opposing viewpoints rather than dismiss them outright. This wasn't because either had abandoned their principles. Instead, they'd come to understand that leadership required more than just conviction. It demanded humility, adaptability, and a commitment to finding solutions, even if those solutions weren't perfect. Their transformation sparked national conversations about privilege, accountability, and the future of American democracy. People debated whether leaders should prioritize ideology or pragmatism, passion or patience. Some argued that Jasmine's unapologetic advocacy was exactly what the country needed to address deep-rooted inequalities. Others believed J.D.'s emphasis on personal responsibility offered a path toward sustainable growth. Both perspectives had merit, and neither could exist without the other. For Jasmine, the experience reinforced her belief in speaking truth to power, even if it meant facing criticism. She doubled down on grassroots efforts, using her platform to uplift marginalized voices often ignored in mainstream discourse. Her courage inspired countless young activists to pursue careers in public service, proving that standing up for what you believe in can ripple outward in ways you never expect. As for J.D., the controversy forced him to reflect on his messaging and priorities. While still steadfast in his principles, he adopted a softer tone, emphasizing unity over division whenever possible. Critics noted a shift toward pragmatism in his legislative proposals, signaling potential growth beyond partisan posturing. Supporters appreciated his ability to evolve without losing sight of his core values. Neither Jasmine nor J.D. emerged as a clear winner in their battle of wills. Their rivalry hadn't resolved the nation's deepest divides. In fact, it highlighted just how entrenched those divides were. But perhaps that was the point. By stepping into the arena and risking everything, they forced America to confront uncomfortable truths about itself. And in doing so, they reminded everyone that democracy isn't static. It's messy, imperfect, and constantly evolving. On a chilly evening months later, Jasmine found herself scrolling through social media again. This time, she paused at a photo of J.D. speaking at a community event. His expression was thoughtful, almost introspective. For a brief moment, she felt a pang of respect, not for his policies, but for his resilience. Politics was a brutal game, and yet here they both were, still fighting for what they believed in. Across the country, J.D. flipped through a magazine featuring an interview with Jasmine. Reading her words, he nodded along to certain points, even jotting down notes in the margins. He didn't agree with everything she said, but he respected her tenacity. Few people would have dared to take on the challenges she did, and fewer still would have kept going after facing such intense scrutiny. In the end, what started as a clash between two ambitious politicians became a mirror reflecting broader societal tensions. Neither walked away unchanged and neither claimed victory. But maybe that was the lesson. Leadership isn't about winning arguments. It's about moving forward together, even when the path is uncertain. And so, Jasmine and JD returned to their respective corners, ready to keep fighting for their beliefs, for their communities, and for a better future. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain: they'd already left their mark on history.